quite often there are quite big differences between individual operators in one country because of the history of how they've invested in the network, how they've done their marketing, how they've designed their price tariffs, how much data they offer, and what kind of consumers they've chosen to acquire. Between parts of the world there are differences because of geography. You know, a city-state like Singapore has a very different dynamic for an operator to roll out coverage than somewhere like Canada, where there's wild areas of wilderness and snow and large spaces between cities. But even between areas which you think might be very similar between, say, Hong Kong and Singapore, both very dense urban populations, we can see differences in the experience that people have because of the way the network's been rolled out, because of the way consumers, the kind of activities they do on their devices. Consumers typically know their own country. They can't buy currently a service plan for an operator in Singapore and use it in Hong Kong. That doesn't work. So I don't think consumers look at that directly. What I do think happens is governments and regulators look at the comparison and go, how are we doing globally? Are we doing okay? If we're not doing as well as we want to do, why not? Should we do something different? If it's a regulator, they might go, you know, are we encouraging infrastructure investment enough? Or they might go, is the market competitive enough? Should we have another operator launch? Or if it's the other way around, if there isn't enough rationale for investing, maybe we should allow a merger to go through. So I think governments and regulators and media look at the international comparisons. I'm not so sure consumers do to the same level of detail. I think what's interesting is 5G currently is primarily an industry term. Next year it will become a consumer term. What we also know is from the standards and from the strategies of the operators, the early launches will probably focus on two of the 5G use cases. They'll focus on enhanced mobile broadband, basically delivering a better experience to smartphone users, and probably in some countries a fixed wireless solution. The other things, the IoT offerings, will have to follow a lot later because the 3GPP standards aren't fully baked yet. So in the mobile broadband scenario, it all comes down to what range of frequencies are available in each country, what range of smartphones are available, as to what the experience will be. In a market where there are millimeter wave bands launching, it's going to be a very different experience to a market where there's primarily mid-band, 3.5, 3.6 gigahertz. Millimeter wave will give incredibly high speed, incredibly high capacity, but have very poor in-building, very poor indoor, and probably even sporadic coverage outdoors depending on what's in the way and what the weather conditions might be. 3.6 will give a much more consistent coverage, but still much faster, much higher capacity than LTE. So it's going to depend. Do consumers care? Well, if they have an experience today that isn't matching what LTE can even be capable of, because the network's overloaded, the frequencies are all full, then they're going to go, yeah, I love 5G because it can give me extra capacity and give me speeds I can't currently get on LTE. If an LTE network today is running really well and delivering a very high quality experience, then maybe there won't be so much pain now that drives people to adopt 5G. I think it's going to depend on the pain. If there's a lot of pain on LTE today, then maybe they will pay a bit more immediately for 5G. I think the other piece you kind of mentioned there, kind of implied, was around the tariffing plans, how much data is available, what price it's at. What we can see in the data that we have is we can see individual operators where the speed that their customers get, that their smartphone users experience on that operator, is much higher at the start of the month than the end of the month. And we think that's because consumers are filling up their data, they're using their quota, and then their speeds are being reduced. So in that situation, well, if 5G has a lot more capacity, so the operator can offer a bit more data, then that's obviously going to tackle a pain point, an end-of-month pain point. In other places, we can see cities where the speed is highly variable between the quiet times of the day and the busy times of the day, which suggests the network is congested. And in that situation, adding new 5G frequency bands on will improve the experience at busy times of the day. Okay, who will pay for that? Probably the consumers that are in that location on a regular basis and know the speeds aren't good in that location that time of the day. And maybe other people that don't go to that location or those parts of the city won't care so much. It's going to vary. Well, what we can see on LTE, for example, is there are even more countries where the LTE experience, the speed that LTE can deliver for smartphone users, is greater than the average speed that Wi-Fi delivers. It's 63% of the 80 countries we studied where LTE is delivering a faster experience on average than Wi-Fi delivers to smartphone users. That's not saying that mobile is faster than fixed networks, it's saying it's faster for smartphone users connecting on Wi-Fi and then onto fixed networks. What's interesting about that is that it means the relationship between Wi-Fi and mobile has to change. Operators need to be careful on offload strategies. What they don't want to do is offload someone from the macro network, from the cellular network onto Wi-Fi, and the consumer have a worse experience on Wi-Fi than they have on cellular. And we all know today there are situations where cellular is faster than Wi-Fi and we manually override the automatic setting on our smartphone. And operators have to be careful about that. Now, Wi-Fi is going to stay around because it's very cheap, it's ubiquitously supported, and it uses unlicensed bands, and it can act as an extension of a fixed network that might be very high capacity. So it's going to stay around. But where maybe 10 or 15 years ago, it was always better than cellular in pretty much every situation, now it needs to be a much more careful judgment call for the operators around offload strategies. They don't want to offload their customers onto someone else's network that doesn't deliver as good an experience as their cellular network, because that undermines the whole point of having mobile.